Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're diving into a fascinating and, let's be honest, kind of scary idea: how a nation's collective memory can be deliberately reshaped, and what that really means for its future. So, the source material we're looking at kicks off with this really powerful line: policies govern the present, memory governs the future. Think about that for a second. It's saying that, yeah, politicians deal with the day-to-day, the here and now, but the real long-term power, that comes from controlling the story a nation tells itself about its own past. This one idea is pretty much the key to everything we're going to unpack today. And that brings us to the big question, right? The one at the heart of this whole thing. What actually happens when the past stops being this field of discovery and debate, and instead gets turned into just another tool for political power? What does that do to a society? Well, the term for this, according to our source, is cultural engineering. And let's be clear, we're not talking about small tweaks here and there. This is a full-on systematic effort to reshape how an entire nation sees itself, its history, its conflicts, all with the end goal of making power more stable. Okay, so how does this whole process even work? Let's get into it. The first big idea is this fundamental shift. A move away from treating history like an open conversation, something that's always up for debate in a democracy, and toward treating it like a closed, managed thing. And this is where you see the purpose of history itself change. It's no longer about inquiry, digging up new evidence, trying to see things from different angles. Instead, the goal becomes alignment. It's all about smoothing out the rough edges, simplifying the moral landscape, and getting everyone on the same page with one single official story. So, why would anyone do this? Well, here's the core motivation. Think about it. A messy, complicated past with all these conflicting stories. That can feel really destabilizing, right? It's hard to govern. But a simple, certain past? That's manageable. It's clean. And in that sense, certainty itself becomes a powerful tool for staying in control. All right, so where is the main battlefield for this cultural engineering? The source is crystal clear on this. It's the classroom. That's ground zero. It's where you lay the foundation for what the next generation will remember and what they'll forget. And when you think about it, that makes total sense, doesn't it? School textbooks aren't just lists of facts and dates. They shape a country's entire imagination. They answer the big questions. Who are the heroes? Who are the villains? What stories define who we are? All those answers get baked right into the curriculum from a young age. And it's not random. The source points to a really clear three-step playbook. Step 1, you compress. You shorten the parts of history where people were disagreeing or protesting. Step 2, you soften. You downplay the really nasty stuff, like episodes of violence or exclusion. And finally, step 3, you just excise. You completely cut out any ideas that offer a serious critique of the nation's story. Now, here's a really critical insight from the source. It argues that what's deleted is way more important than what's added. See, if you add a bunch of biased information, people can spot it, they can argue against it, but when you just remove something, it leaves no trace, it creates a void, and it quietly shrinks the space for what can even be talked about or questioned in the first place. And that brings us to this quote, which just nails it. It did not falsify history outright. It deactivated its critical function. The strategy isn't necessarily to lie. It's so much more subtle. It's about surgically removing the parts of history that make you think, that make you question. It basically turns history off as a critical tool and turns it into a story that just pats you on the back. But of course, this kind of project doesn't just stay locked in the classroom. It bleeds out into the real world. So now let's look at how this carefully edited version of the past starts to ripple out and change the entire fabric of a society. So the new story is all about pride, but it's a specific kind of pride. The source describes it as a pride that's detached from any kind of ethical tension or self-reflection. Your heritage isn't presented as this complex, messy thing you have to wrestle with. No, it's presented as a finished, shiny trophy to just put on the shelf and admire. And this causes a major shift in the culture. The first thing to go? Curiosity. It gets replaced by pride. I mean, why would you ask tough questions about the past when you've already been handed the simple, glorious answer? And that leads right into the next change. Affirmation pushes out analysis. The whole point of engaging with history is no longer to analyze it or challenge it. It's just to nod along and agree. This is a fundamental change in how a culture relates to its own story. So what about pluralism? The idea of a society with lots of different groups and traditions? Well, the source says that the idea of pluralism might survive, but the substance gets hollowed out. A sort of unofficial hierarchy gets created. Some traditions are the real ones, the foundational ones, and others, well, they're secondary. Your inclusion is now conditional. It's like, you're welcome to be part of the story, as long as your part of the story doesn't challenge our main story. And when you draw these cultural lines in the sand so clearly, something interesting happens. The enforcement doesn't just come from the top down, from the government. It starts to come from the ground up. Society itself begins to enforce the rules. The source points to things like a rise in moral policing, vigilantism, and symbolic aggression, as regular people start to feel it's their job to defend the official story. Okay, so what's the end game here? What's the ultimate price a society pays for this kind of simple, certain national story? That's what we're going to look at in our final section, the long-term costs. And look, it's really important to get why this stuff is so appealing. When the world feels chaotic and confusing, a simple, strong identity can feel like an anchor. It offers stability, a sense of belonging. That's a really powerful promise. But that promise comes with a very, very high price tag. And what is that price? The source has a great term for it: intellectual contraction. It's like a muscle that's not being used. A society's ability to think critically, to be okay with ambiguity, to wrestle with really complex ideas, it just starts to shrink. And this is the real long-term danger, the effect that gets passed down through generations. A healthy, functioning democracy absolutely needs citizens who are comfortable with disagreement, with debate. But this kind of cultural engineering does the opposite. It produces citizens who are only comfortable with affirmation. And you can see how that would have some pretty profound and frankly scary implications for a democracy. Which all leads to this final, pretty chilling conclusion from the source. When power curates memory, it also curates the limits of thought. It's not just about changing the story of the past. It's about fundamentally limiting what people are capable of thinking about in the present and the future. It's like building a cage for the mind. So we're left with this really big, tough question to chew on. Once a country's memory has been flattened and simplified like this, is it even possible to get back that messy, complex, and contested version of its own history? And if so, how? That's something to think about. Thanks for joining me for this explainer.